Here in the east, the area had been reduced to a barren wasteland by Ivarage's attacks. Nicholas, who was responsible for maintaining a corner of the holy field, remained unharmed despite being exposed to dangerous attacks repeatedly, thanks to everyone's desperate efforts to protect him. Arnaud, in charge of the airspace, was also enduring the onslaught, clinging tightly to the Tower of Heaven. It seemed he was doing his best to erase his presence and stay as inconspicuous as possible. That couldn't be helped, though. If he were to get caught up in a battle this intense, maintaining the barrier would be out of the question. Despite being in a situation where escape was impossible, they were getting caught in the aftershocks of my clash with Veldanava. I was trying my best to prevent collateral damage, but this was simply beyond my control force majeure. That was just how devastating the damage to the surrounding area was from the sword fight between Veldanava and me. The energy contained within our swords was so tremendous that a shockwave was generated the instant they clashed. Or rather, an explosion. The expression "the atmosphere bursting apart" would be accurate. Massive destruction was occurring, lacking only the heat rays. It was far too dangerous, so I chose to dodge rather than block with my sword. However, that presented its own set of problems. Veldanava's swordsmanship was so sharp that it was impossible to dodge after seeing this swing. My multi-layer barrier deployed at full power was shattered in a single blow. However, without it, I would take massive damage, so I had to recast it every time it was broken. Even my future attack prediction was unreliable. Veldanava was simply too fast. However, an unexpected savior appeared at this juncture. Rimuru-san. Dodge right. It was a thought communication from Chloe. I followed her words without hesitation or doubt. The result, naturally, was a magnificent and successful dodge. Veldanava looked suspicious, but I didn't care. I maintained a calm expression, acting as if to say, that was all my own skill. Veldanava continued his fierce onslaught, but thanks to Chloe's advice, I was able to deal with it safely and reliably. Since I had some breathing room, it was easier to parry with my sword. Blocking head-on would generate a shockwave, but by parrying the blows, I could prevent the excess energy from exploding outwards. Magnificent. I wanted to shut him out completely just like this, without any further incidents. Or so I thought, but that turned out to be wishful thinking. Well, it's always like this. Thinking about taking the easy way out is always a mistake. The first unexpected event was the collapse of several above-ground floors of the Tower of Heaven, immediately after a roar echoed across the battlefield. Arnaud was so startled he nearly fell from the outer wall. If he had been positioned a little lower, he might have been caught in the collapse, and the holy field might have been deactivated. In that sense, it wasn't the worst-case scenario yet. Rather, since he was safe, you could say it was barely good luck. Even so, I knew from personal experience just how sturdy the Tower of Heaven was. For that thing to collapse, it was undoubtedly a catastrophic situation. It was unclear what had happened, but this wasn't the time to worry about it. A beautiful woman flew out from where it had collapsed. It was Ivarage, in the form of Millam's mother, Lucia, heading straight for us. Was the target me, or Veldanava? It seems to be Veldanava. But this is the worst. If it's not me, then that's a relief, or so I thought, until Chloe made that ominous remark. Or rather, since it seemed to be a confirmed future event, ominous didn't even begin to cover it. As I braced myself wondering what would happen, the answer became clear immediately. Kayaha. You are mine. As Ivarage shouted that and lunged in, Veldanava thrust his sword into his chest. Then, he swung it downward, pinning Ivarage to the ground. The sword, harboring immense energy comparable to a true dragon, halted Ivarage's movements. I was dumbfounded, but I realized this was different in nature from a normal attack. I see. That sword memory seems to have the effect of implanting past memories into the target. In this case, he's transplanting memories into Ivarage. And those memories are... You bastard, are you planning to implant Lucia's memories into Ivarage? Before I could point it out, Guy, who had chased after Ivarage, interjected. I knew the answer because I had heard it, but it seemed Guy had deduced it just by looking at the situation. And having come this far, he likely guessed Veldanava's goal as well. I thought recreating Ivarage as Lucia was impossible no matter how you looked at it, but... Ha. Don't tell me, since you couldn't resurrect the dead one, you intend to create her all over again. Yeah. He apparently intends to destroy this world to recover all the information particles scattered throughout it. That's absurd. I thought he was a fool, but it turns out he's still a fool even after coming back to life. Guy said bitingly. He continued to complain, saying things like true dragons aren't just selfish, they're all idiots. Velzard and Vildor, who arrived late, also had bitter expressions at this. Exactly. I am so wise, yet it is pathetic as a blood relative. No, I think the most selfish one is Millam, you know. You're the same too. Guy asserted this before I even had to point it out. The reason I didn't say it was that I was debating whether Vildor or Millam was more selfish. Since there are two peas in a pod, Guy's statement was the correct answer. I nodded deeply, showing my agreement. Now then, Ivarage has been immobilized. Perhaps because information is flowing in from memory, it looks like all strength has left its body, and it isn't moving a muscle. It's unclear what will happen after it recovers, but it will likely take some time until then. In that case, the best move is to stop Veldanava before Ivarage recovers. Let's challenge him all together, while we can. I propose. Hearing this, Veldanava smiled. Good grief. Do you all intend to oppose me together? With that statement, the air froze. Even Guy was tense, but he seemed to switch gears in an instant and showed his resolve. Can be helped. Stopping you is my duty as someone who was your friend. Following this, Velzard smiled. That's right. He taught me that just obeying isn't enough. I wouldn't make mistakes anymore. My way couldn't heal brother's loneliness. Velzard seemed to be regretting that. True dragons have skewed sensibilities, so I couldn't be totally at ease, but she shouldn't do anything crazy anymore. Vildor has not wavered in his actions from the beginning until now. I believe in Rimuru. He remained reliable as ever. Incidentally, he didn't seem as frightened of his brother as he was of his sisters. That might also be a difference in emotional attachment. Milim also made her hostility toward Veldanava clear. You're being too selfish. I also have the desire for loved ones to return to life, but sacrificing others for that sake is something I struggle to understand. Milim's statement was a truly reasonable opinion. But, however, even though he was admonished by his daughter, it didn't resonate in Veldanava's heart. He showed a sad expression, but he spoke prioritizing only his own feelings. I don't necessarily have to erase everyone, you know. At the very least, for those who were alive before Lucia died, the possibility of her fragments being mixed in is zero. I can overlook them. In other words, he was saying that if it was just Guy and the others present here, he would take them to the new world he would create. However, there was no one who would nod to this. In particular, Velzard wore an expression of anger and questioned Veldanava. Brother, you gave me a grace period, didn't you? You promised that you would take those I froze to the next world. Was it a lie? It was inferred from Velzard's words that she intended to freeze not just Milim's subordinates, but many more people if possible. And the reason for that was Velzard's own form of kindness, trying to reduce the casualties. It makes one think, if only they had done proper reporting, communicating, and consulting, but since it's already over, we'll have to learn from it for next time. More importantly, Veldanava's answer to that question was what mattered. Well, I could guess to some extent. If Lucia had resurrected successfully, I wouldn't have killed them. That means if there was anyone harboring fragments of the factors that constituted Lucia, he intended to annihilate them without mercy to recover the information particles. Feldway was the same, but why do they always run towards such reckless actions? Brother, you are broken. Is that so? Yes. That is why I will also resist with all my might. Velzard was the one closest to Veldanava. That Velzard had just declared her severance as a relative. Hearing that, I also felt complex emotions. Being told this much, couldn't he reflect on himself a little? I hope so, but Veldanava remained unwavering in the worst way. That's a shame, Veldanava shrugged. The sad expression he showed earlier was wiped away in an instant. He probably really is broken. He genuinely cares about nothing other than Lucia. The dangerous atmosphere was becoming increasingly dense. I wasn't the only one feeling it. A look of tension appeared on everyone's faces. It seemed battle was unavoidable. Now then, you said your name was Rimuru. The reason you were able to contend with me was because the person hiding there was advising you, wasn't it? But those cheap tricks end now. As Veldanava snapped his fingers expressionlessly, space tore open and Chloe came tumbling out. Her entire body was covered in cuts, and her side was gored deeply. He was empty-handed, and there wasn't even a sign of him activating any authority, yet it was an outrageous technique. He had vibrated the air to turn it into blades, targeting Chloe from all directions. Chloe seemed to have reacted instantly to avoid a fatal wound, but it was a serious injury. Even though she detected the danger instantly and dodged, Veldanava's attack speed seemed to have surpassed her. What existed there was an absolute gap in ability that could not be filled. I'm sorry, Rimuru-san. I've been found out, so I don't think I can advise you anymore. Forget that, as long as you're safe, that's all that matters. Regarding Chloe's injury, Luminous, who had been grasping the situation, was already healing her without saying a word. Given that it was taking time to fully heal despite perfect backup, it was indeed a very deep wound. Truly, I was just glad Chloe was safe. But this was no time to be relieved. The next instant, the world had stopped. Everyone who could still move realized that Veldanava had dominated time. That meant the battle had shifted to a higher dimensional stage. Veldanava said. It seems she can recall memories of the future. I was impressed by such a skillful feat, but it loses all meaning if I simply stop time. Since we can move even within the suspended world, there would normally be no point in stopping time. However, this was the optimal method to nullify Chloe's authority. Moreover, to make matters worse, the three individuals Veldanava regenerated, Jahal, Cornu, and Vega, were also rampaging normally within this suspended world. Our combat power has been drastically reduced, but if you look at it another way, there is also the upside of avoiding unnecessary casualties. That is, assuming we can maneuver well enough not to affect those unable to move in this suspended world, but even so, it didn't seem to be entirely bad. If I didn't think that way, I'd probably start feeling depressed. Even Willem is chatting with Chloe about something, perhaps to keep her spirits up. Chloe. You didn't give me diligent advice when it was my turn, yet you told Rimuru the exact trajectory of the sword strokes. Isn't that showing way too much favoritism? That was the strategy, wasn't it? Besides, I don't owe you anything in the first place. I don't really feel like being that kind to you. That's unfair. So unfair. It's not unfair. Rimuru-san is precious to me, so this is the natural response. I shouldn't have listened. Willem, I understand the urge to complain, but please pick a better time and place. And Chloe, bickering right after sustaining a serious injury. I'm glad you're energetic, but I would have liked a more mature response. During my turn, she even shared her senses with me, allowing me to vicariously experience the future she saw, and informed me of the future attack stroke by stroke. Thanks to that, I was able to respond perfectly, even against Veldanava's attacks. It seems things were different for Willem. Well, perhaps we were found out because we overdid it, but there's no use talking about that now. Now that it's come to this, we have no choice but to fight with our own true strength. Just as I was thinking that, Veldanava extended his hand toward the sword lying near Ivarage. In that instant, a sword emitting a presence similar to, yet different from, a memory, settled into Veldanava's hand, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He really does whatever he pleases, even in a stopped world. Magic isn't even supposed to be usable, but it is a mistake to try and judge Veldanava by common sense. I braced myself. But, however, I would come to realize immediately after this that alone was nowhere near enough. Now then, shall we get on with it? If you insist on getting in my way, I will have to eliminate you. That's my lie. I tried to retort, but I couldn't finish the sentence. Veldanava drove his sword in sharply. The moment I blocked it. Soul Caesar. I was overcome by a gentle sensation, as if my whole body were being enveloped. It must be an authority. It wasn't on the level of something like administrator privileges. As if to say that this was simply the natural order of things, the action began and ended without a hint of discord. My consciousness faded away.